Okay, hi everybody. Are you here for Wellness Wednesday or not?
We're not. We're looking.
Okay.
So we just come back and look at it.
Yeah. It's probably best to just.
I just read the material stuff to order.
I don't think. Yeah. It's just okay. Yeah. Yeah, we can then choose everyone else. Okay. So, and that means following. So, how do you round?
I go to a certain extent, but it'll probably go up on the stage. But once it gets your
How far around does it go?
it will go around the whole way, but you need to be able to capture it.
Okay, but it's only on the stage.
No, it should follow you around the entire time. But it needs to
Okay.
basically mention what
Okay, what's mine? Do you want to give me one of those? And then, yeah. Okay. All right. Hi. I'm Lizzy Lowenstein. Hi. At the other side as well, and we are just going to start with thinking about the whole area of performance. So, would you like to just spend a few minutes to get your minds into the whole subject? Just have a look at these statements on this piece of paper and talk to each other. And basically find somebody who you can fit into. So there's 4 of you. Why don't you divide into pairs? And then if the two of you do the top part, so up to the top three, and the two of you do the bottom half, and but literally just you choose any statements and just basically talk to each other and see whether that resonates. You know, have you got a values framework in your business? Can you define high performance? Just to get your head into the subject, really. So just 3 minutes, have a little bit of a chat. And so if you guys carry on, and I'll talk to the others. For those who are watching, these are statements all around performance. So they're just getting used to thinking about what the psychology of performance is all about. So if you're sitting there thinking, think to yourselves, what actually is high performance for you? What does it actually mean? So what is high performance? What are the key factors that influence and create high performance? And how do we achieve it and maintain it? Think about that. Think about what actually does that mean to you. And talk to each other. If you've got somebody to talk to, then otherwise, maybe write down a few thoughts. What is the definition of high performance for you?
No, not as in somebody's job title as a consultant, somebody's status as a consultant. Yeah, that was where I was looking back into your payment. And also,
Okay, so let's, I know this could take there's a lot of topics here, but I just wanted to get your head really around this, the whole complexity of the issue, that actually performance is a big thing. We do give ourselves a hard time as humans as well, don't we? Because even just that word performance is, you know, we're talking about actually behaviours, and the word performance itself actually is about saying we're on show, we're acting, we're having to perform. So actually, we've got to think to ourselves, what is it that we're trying to do, and what are the factors that influence us? So, but I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm an organisational psychologist, and my background is business psychology. And one of the reasons that I came into this line of work is because there was just so little understanding of psychology and the application of psychology to business. So we do know so much about psychology, and yet apply so little. And that's really a lot of what this is about. So do you want to just share a little bit about did you have any?
Well, you just like to sort of performance in your life. You can say how we essentially
You do intentionally clarify. Oh, you don't?
Okay.
Okay.
And then, but we can recap
You go for a walk. Yeah. Oh, reward. Okay. Yeah.
And
Come a bit closer. Yeah. You're thinking reward affects my performance.
yes, factors that influence.
Oh, okay, reward. Okay.
And then subject engagement.
Okay.
Very interested as a subject.
Yeah.
More likely to be performing in it.
Yeah. Okay. So there's lots of areas, definitely. Let me one of the key things, of course, is well-being. And well-being, and you know what, a big factor for affecting performance is enjoyment. In fact, one of the key things that research has shown is that enjoyment is actually a massive area that links with productivity as well. But what Investors in Learning does is very much focus on culture, because the culture can actually drive a lot of the performance factors. So what I wanted to just share with you is the importance of focusing on the three interrelations between individual, team, and whole performance. So because what we've got to ask ourselves is, what is the interrelationship? Oh, it doesn't work on this thing. Sorry, no, never mind. What I was going to do is scribble on the screen, because what is so important is to. I've got captions on there now. It's to look at, okay, you've got the individual in the centre, then you've got the team, then you've got the whole organisation. But actually, which way round does it go? You know, does the organisation impact the individual? Does the individual impact the team? And of course, well, what do you think? And when I say organisation, it might be a group of 5 people, might be a group of 10 people, might be a multinational company with loads of departments. You know, it can come in any form, of any shape or form. But you've got the individual, the team, the organisation, and everybody's trying to get into high performance mode, which is, as I say, we give ourselves a hard time using that term in a way. But where do you think the energy comes from?
I think it's the culture in the organisation. You've got a culture that's high performing driven.
Yeah.
That will influence team members' behaviours and it's combination.
Exactly. It's very dynamic. And what a lot of companies, they go out to recruit somebody thinking that, okay, we're going to have this individual who will now make it all happen. We're finding somebody who will now drive whatever we need to drive. However, what research shows is unless the company has already got certain things in place to help that individual to actually flourish, to bring their skills, it's literally about 50-50. It's about 50-50 percentage. The company has got to have certain things in place already in order to actually help that individual flourish. So if you're looking for an innovator, you need to give the innovator a playground. So otherwise, if the playground doesn't exist, the innovator will withdraw and find another place to go. So it's this fallacy of recruitment is that we can bring somebody in and that the company themselves might say, okay, just work your magic. But actually, it is very interrelated. So we've really got to remember, and culture does drive strategy, process, and the skills and capabilities. So culture is everything. It really is. And culture is really defined as how we do things around here. And without the right culture, you can really destroy a lot of motivation and enjoyment. And it ends up being, you can have a very high performing person who's high performing from within and very driven and intentional, who doesn't perform because of a particular culture. So we've got to remember that performance is very interrelated. So what we do at Investors in Learning is we do psychology. So in terms of trying to understand how we can perform better, you need to really understand the whole psychology. the psychology of the individual, the psychology of the team, and the psychology of the whole organisation. Because then you can actually understand what performance means. So rather than looking at performance as a sort of this abstract thing, we have to look at the human being, the whole human. So these things that are dotted around, you can see this that we've created, and the human element sits in the middle. The human element drives everything. And then it's so fundamental that identity drives how then things are actually measured. But the human element, there's a lot of information on here. We can't sort of cover in a very short time here, but the very important thing is that we've got to come to work as a human. We've got to come to work or to our tasks as a learner, and not just a person who has a list of tasks to commit to. So how do we get this human engagement? And one of the very, very important things is identity. Now, would you say you are clear about the identity of the company that you work with? So when I say identity, we've broken that down into 4 subheadings, which is purpose, vision, values, and communication. So do you know, would you say there's a really clear idea of what the purpose is of the company that you work with, or the company that you might run, or the company that you are associated with? Are you really clear about the purpose, the why? You don't have to share it, just think in your mind whether that's a yes or a no.
Yeah, we've got values-driven organisations, so that was this area, and yeah, we've got quite clear values that we have measured against to make sure.
Okay. Now that's brilliant. So the thing is, if you don't have a leadership team that actually drives that conversation around identity, who are we as a company, then you also will have a problem with performance. It is directly linked. So it's not just the internal person, is that person driven? Of course, there's the traits of the person, but you also need the identity. So you need to have a clear purpose, clear vision, clear values, and then those need to be communicated effectively across the company as well, or across the teams. But not just communication top down, you need to have actually people who are engaged in that conversation, and you're part of it, and you're allowed to actually create your identity, your version of that identity. Because actually it's completely old-fashioned and ridiculous, really, if you think about it, to think, right, I'm the leader, I'm telling you what the vision is, and you're just going to absorb this and now live it. No, you've actually got to be allowed to develop your own version of the identity, because we all have different filters. I think it was me. We all have different filters. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you was the importance of understanding the brain as well, in order to understand how your filters really will impact how you perform, but also then how a team performs. But before we do that, I think it'd be a good idea to really say, why is this so important right now? Why is it even more important now, in this crazy time we're living in, to really think about how we can really perform as effectively as possible? And the fact is that we're living in a very, very fast-changing world, and especially in cyber and tech. It's a very, very changing, probably the fastest changing sector there is. And everybody in the sector, you have to be so aware of the responsibilities of, probably, I was thinking about this, probably this cyber tech sector, you have more responsibilities than in many other sectors, because every decision that an individual makes can have an impact very quickly. Whether you are scoping a project for a client, or whether you're coding something for something, but the thing is, the whole idea of tech is it's scalable, isn't it? It'll affect a lot of people. So if you don't get your internal structures right in your company, your communication is honest and transparent, and you've got a good psychological safety as well, then you end up potentially with all the brains and the complexity of our brains and how we think and all the defense mechanisms we have, and maybe even a lack of identity of what you're even doing, lack of clarity, and potentially creating a lot of problems. And you're creating problems that rather than solving them. So that open communication is really, really important. So the continuous resilient learning culture is a counterbalance to that external uncertainty and change, but also We need self-team organizational knowledge, development, and leadership, and that can help to counterbalance. Because the fast-changing world around us, if you've got internal clarity on what your identity, internal clarity on what your processes are, internal clarity on how you measure performance, what performance is, not just for the whole business, but also for each and individual role. You come to your role, whether you're sitting at home behind your computer or whether you're in the office with your team, you know what good looks like. You know how you're going to be measured. You know that you won't be, in fact, measuring performance is a whole massive subject in itself. If you have scales of 0 to 10 in an appraisal, people are now suggesting it's better not to use those scales and find more positive psychology approaches to use, and to use learning conversations in your conversations rather than just meeting objectives and trying and having this, what are you not achieving? You know, the brain likes positive things, the brain likes enjoyment. So we need to try to focus on working with people's strengths as much as possible, their natural strengths, so that actually those strengths can come to the job, and then find out if you're not achieving. You know, very often people are not achieving because they're not working with their natural strengths. And then actually the best thing for the leaders to do is to say, well, this person seems to be struggling, maybe he's in the wrong role, maybe we can move around the tasks a bit. And maybe actually, so if you do a strengths analysis of the team, you can actually identify very often, and obviously you need that openness of communication. You need to be able to be open and honest and say, I'm getting sick and tired of doing this particular piece of work. Somebody else might say, you know what, I'd love to do it. Great, I'll hand it over to you. I'll coach you how to do it. Both people are happy. Everybody's, and productivity will go up because you're enjoying it. But have those conversations rather than that threatening defense mechanism, that feeling of, I better appear competent. I better, I want to be liked, competent, and included. Those are 3 things that are naturally what humans want. But actually, unless the leadership is open enough to bring that narrative across the company, and you have the wrong ways of measuring performance and the wrong narrative of you're not achieving your objectives, not doing this, then in fact that individual energy, the spirit, can't flourish. So performance and how it's measured and how it's defined is really, really a very important area for how your company unfolds. I just wanted to also share with you a little video, okay? Because I think it's important to look at the future, okay? And look at the context in which we're living and say, well, performance is about the individual, the team, of the organisation, but actually it's also about the really, really the big picture of where we're living in. Obviously, cyber, you will be more aware if you're in the tech sector of how the world is being ruled and affected by technology. I mean, technology is everywhere.
Explain that with sound.
Good question. And in fact, the other thing is that we need to be logged on to the Wi-Fi. I think I am.
I think you might be able.
While I'm doing that, will the sound work?
It will work on the speakers.
Okay. While I'm doing that, just think to yourself, do you know actually what good looks like within your role? Are you clear about that for yourself and your own role? And then also, what are the factors that influence you? Where would you say you feel most engaged? What are the tasks that you do when you feel most engaged? And what are the tasks which you'd rather not do? And if you've got more tasks that you'd rather not do than you do, then actually there should be a bit of a job analysis going on in terms of, maybe you need to adjust your work in some ways, because you should be 75%, a minimum of 75% enjoyment in your job in order to be as productive as possible. And that's really minimum, because if you think about it, that 25% that you're spending not enjoying it, then you've got that drain zone where you're recovering from that lack of enjoyment. So if I'm looking at Excel spreadsheet all day, I know that's not what I enjoy. Sometimes I know I have to do it, but I'm very happy to hand the Excel spreadsheet over to somebody else as soon as I possibly can. But I know that about myself, so I will give myself those jobs more than I have to. And if I find somebody who loves Excel spreadsheets, please, rather than me hogging my sheets, So, sorry, I'm just going to think about your jobs. Ah. Okay. Hopefully this should work. Yeah.
So let's say you have to read an incredibly long email from your boss that you have to finish before the big meeting starts in 10 minutes.
Oh dear, we have a problem because. Oh no, that's fine.
Once upon a time, business
There we go.
execution was often good enough. No more. Where we are going, good enough is dead. In a world where everything is connected, where everything is equally excellent, where performance is reaching perfection, there's only one space left to win. Right now, you are a central part of the region to lead off change fueled by digitization, urbanization, augmentation, disintermediation, automation, where all the list goes on. Science fiction is becoming science.
Okay, apologies. We shall start again. I thought it was displaying and it wasn't. Is it loud enough?
Once upon a time, business as usual was often good enough. No more. Where we are going, good enough is dead. In a world where everything is connected, where everything is equally excellent, where performance is reaching perfection, there's only one space left within. Right now, you are a central part of the region to lead off change fueled by digitization, urbanization, augmentation, disintermediation, automation, well, the list goes on. Science fiction is becoming science fact. Think about self-driving cars and computers that can learn this thing. The regular work will never be the same. The skills we need will be dramatically different. Winning or losing are now happening faster than ever before. So what's your response? How will you discover new opportunities in one of the most transformational times in human history? Are you driving change, or are you being driven by it? Disruption has become the new normal. With change, it's always gradually, then suddenly, well, things really have stopped happening gradually. This change is exponential. Everything that used to be dumb and disconnected is now wired intelligent. Cars, cities, ports, farms, even our bodies will be wired with sensors and will talk to each other. These game changers are also complementary. They amplify each other, creating a perfect storm of change. Quantum computing fuels big data. The Internet of Things fuels artificial intelligence and deep learning, which fuels robotics. However, anything that cannot be digitized or automated will become extremely valuable. Human-only traits such as creativity, imagination, intuition, emotion, and ethics will be even more important in the future, because machines are very good at simulating, but not at being. Yes, robots and software will do some of our work. This will allow us to focus on things that cannot be automated. To imagine change squared, you've got to start engaging more with what might be, not just with what is. Immerse yourself in the immediate future, 5 to 7 years out from today. We need to go beyond technology and data to reach human insights and wisdom. Technology technology represents the power of change, and humans represent the why. The future is about holistic business model. The opportunities to be liquid, to move just in time, not just in case, not single improvements, but complete transformations, not individual systems, but new ecosystems. Humanity is where true and lasting value is created. We will engage, rate, and buy things because of the experiences they provide, because of their transformative power. The future doesn't just happen, the future gets happened. The new way to work is to embrace technology, but not to become it. The future is in technology, but the bigger future lies in transcending it. Let's live and lead from here.
So, the basic message is that the individual counts. Actually, the individual is so, so important. There was actually a lot of information in that. It looked, so everything is connected. Everything where performance is reaching perfection. So, you know, we look at the word perfection, performance. It's actually linked, isn't it? But ultimately, unless you are at the heart of it, and unless the individual is really, really developing themselves, then it is possible that technology and all the abstraction will actually take over. So that's what that's really saying. So you are central, and also the tech, the cyber cannot ever take over from the human. Humans, all this stuff, automation, augmentation, mobilization, digitalization, only human traits will ever actually be, they will become even more valuable. So, you know, people are worried about losing their jobs. But actually, if we turn it around and say, well, actually, humans are going to be more valuable in the future because a human can never have emotions. A human can never do what we do. Sorry, a machine can never have emotions. A machine can never, ever replace us. So let's be confident about creativity, intuition, emotion, ethics, values, imagination. Those are the things that we need to give to the computers. And in cyberspace, in cyber industries, those are the things that we offer. And so we need to be so, so careful that we do that well. Hence, going back to saying why we need to really focus intentionally on how are we performing, what are we doing? So yeah, we need to do it more consciously. Machines will never truly replace us. And we've got to make sure that we focus on the human element, which is sitting at the heart of everything. Now, human element sits in the middle. The identity I was talking about earlier has got to be really, really clear at an individual level, team level, and organizational level. So if you don't know who you are, what your purpose is within a team, if the team doesn't know what the purpose is in the organization, and the organization doesn't share back to the teams what their purpose is, there's going to be a disconnect. And you're never going to be able to perform as well as you can because you're walking around at little task managers doing different things. Communications are disjointed. So the fact that you said earlier that your company really does share a lot, and there's a lot to do with values, and because it's the identity is defined as the purpose, vision, values, and communication. So unless you've got all those, the three things that lead to the communication, actually, it doesn't work as well as it could do. So that's really positive.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the norm, but it's really good. And the human elements, this is really the way that we've got the engagement, the strengths, the relationships, the emotional intelligence. Those things really honing in on those so that they are strong and affecting how performance works. But do you know about the brain? Do you know? No? Do you know the basics about the brain? As in, any to do with the emotions and how powerful emotions are. So basically, we have two hemispheres, and inside we have one of the most important parts of the brain is the limbic system, which, as you can see, so this is one part of the hemisphere. As we can see, if you take this off, it's nestled in the middle here. So it's ultimately completely and utterly interconnected. It's you can see how it literally is a part. I mean, obviously these are interconnected with fibers, connecting them. But the limbic system is where all the emotions and everything happens. And the cerebellum is the oldest part of the brain. And this is actually where our basic sort of bodily functions are regulated. But the emotions are very, very linked to the old part of our brain. And basically, the firing in here will inform everything that happens on the top part of the brain. The top part of the brain is called the cerebrum, which is basically the cerebral outer layer. That is to do with numbers, language, all those things that we think performance is made up of. But actually, performance comes from the whole brain, not just the brain, but the entire nervous system. So, how quickly do you think, if you have an emotional release or a thought, or whether it's a high enjoyment thing or a very negative thing, how more quickly do you think that the brain cells fire in the limbic system? Some people call it the emotional brain, as apart from the thinking brain, which is the top layer. This is the much older class. How much more quickly do you think the brain cells fire? Very quickly. Yeah, very quickly.
But I don't know how much more quickly, but
so it's 10,000 times. 10,000 times more quickly. So if you feel emotional, or if you have an emotional trigger, this part of your brain will respond and make everything happen in your body 10,000 times more quickly than the top part of your brain, which is your thinking brain, which is basically where we compute and where we put ideas together, we communicate. The stuff we're doing now, we're pretty good at it. But the brain is still much, much stronger and better at doing the emotional stuff, and it will always win. It will always win. Which is why, unless we raise things to the conscious level, and actually talk to each other as a team, and as a whole organization, the leadership has got to give that narrative. If there are defense mechanisms, which we all have to protect ourselves, to make ourselves look as good as we can in this world that we're trying to win in, and be as effective as we can be, you will always have the defense mechanism being stronger than, and sometimes hurting you. So you've got to be really, really careful. So understanding defense mechanisms is a really big part of learning how to actually deal with performance. And in a high-performing culture, with a culture that really, really helps the business to understand, everybody should understand defense mechanisms. Really. And everybody should be able to sort of understand also how they make each other feel safe. Because we all have them. And that's because we're surviving beings. So, and understanding the basics of the brain is really, really important. And if you think, the other thing is really, really important to remember is that we're patterning machines. So we all have patterns, we all have habits. And these habits can become helpful, but they can also become our enemy. And if you imagine, you've got a brain, that's you, but then if you're in a team, you've got all these other brains fighting with each other, okay? So, if you're in a team, you've got lots of very, very ingrained, strong patterns that are happening between each other, and everybody is taking care of their own patterns. And the patterns are there, they're really, really strong. So unless you have the right team environment where everybody is aware of the biases that a team can bring, because we tend to recruit, we tend to like to go towards people who are in our own image, who are like us, which actually a high-performing team is not about having people that are all like you. A high-performing team has got to have diversity, not just diversity in the way that we talk about it mostly today, in terms of cultural diversity and, you know, having positive discrimination to bring in people as much as possible, but thinking diversity. We've got to encourage each other to think. We've got to have that openness. So there's this big thing which we all should know about called groupthink. It's really, really important to be aware of groupthink because it happens every day in every team. And we need to be able to be disruptive and challenge each other. And unless there is the culture that says that's okay, it doesn't on the whole happen. Apart from if you're a very unique human, you don't care about what other people think of you. But we all care what other people think of us. So ultimately what happens is those patterns, we get polarized. So we can see that in society now, can't we? How much polarization is happening. So when we have one brain, it's one thing, one brain and body. But then if we have multiple brains, we have a different effect. We have a group psychology. So this is why, as I said earlier, we've got to have individual psychology, team psychology, and organization psychology, and understanding how they actually link. So that's why we've developed programs in learning leadership, working at the individual level, the team level, and the organization level, so you can become a learning leader. And the idea is if you're a leader of yourself and you understand your learning process, that will also help you to be the best performer possible. So we have, for individuals, we have becoming a high-performing learning team and becoming a high-performing learning organization. Because the learning organization really needs that understanding that that is what you're all striving for. Because especially with how quickly things are going now, unless you are very intentionally focused on learning and performance, then it's going to be left up to chance. And leaving things to chance is never going to be as good as when it's designed. So high performance needs to be designed. And organizational development and the learning organization needs to be designed. It will not come by chance. You might by chance have a really good leader, of course, who sort of just makes that happen naturally. But then if that leader also has a design to go with his or her natural traits, even better. Because if you just leave things to chance, they will never be as good as if you design them with best-in-class psychology in mind. So, how are we doing? How are we doing for time?
Yes.
Okay. So, key factors, ingredients that influence learning and performance. Of course, wellness. Well-being. This is a Wellness Wednesday. I love the idea of the Wellness Wednesdays, by the way. Yeah, it's a really good idea. But well-being is about being well generally, isn't it? Yeah, and you can't actually perform unless you are holistically well. That is because your nervous system is completely interrelated with the brain. Descartes in the 17th century had this thing called dualism. You know, he brought up this idea that the brain is separate from the body. But we still sometimes talk as if we were separate. But we are one whole being, you know, and our nervous system can control us completely. So feeling well, this idea of well-being is a very generic term, isn't it? It's sort of just everything is, you're looking after yourself as a whole human, is fundamental. And also it links to performance, to enjoyment. So, sorry. So there is the enjoyment performance theory that works this way around in terms of enjoyment, but it also works the other way around in terms of when you don't like something. So if you enjoy something, you repeat it. That repetition makes you improve, and then that gives you the feedback that you're doing well, and then you enjoy it more. And so that's a virtuous cycle. But if you do something that you're not enjoying, it goes the other way around. So you can become more and more negative thinking. So the more you enjoy something, the more you're going to be productive. And there's been a lot of research around that. And we actually use a tool that measures your enjoyment in relation to things, and which then can help us to understand which traits to use in different situations for different jobs. So in terms of which factors influence performance, it's really, really important that you know your patterns, that you are self-aware. So self-awareness is one of the key things. If I've had to summarize it, really, really just make it very simple, the factors that influence your performance. Self-awareness, openness to learning, and learning in action. Those are the three areas that where they overlap is where the magic happens. Unless you know your own patterns, you don't know what your actual strengths and also your derailers are. And knowing your patterns is what you can learn more about when you are. That's why we use particular profiling tools, because it gives you a set of mirrors basically, so you can help to understand yourself. But the thing is, you can look at this and be really self-aware, say, okay, yes, I'm doing all this learning. But unless you're open to learning, that's going back to this idea of defense mechanisms, unless you're actually open to that information, it's that self-awareness is going to be limited. But then also, if you don't put it into action, then what's the point? Do you know what I mean? Nobody's going to actually see any change. So action learning is so important. And so often people do this psychology stuff. They just talk about it, and then they go back to their desks and nothing changes. No, you've got to actually, and this has got to come from the leadership, you've got to actually design it into the fabric of how you behave, how you act, what you do in practice, because learning comes from doing. So learning in action is really, really important. And then I've added just one other thing to it, which is other awareness. Because self-awareness does not mean that you're other aware. Some people are very self-aware. They do a lot of meditation, they tune in with themselves, they go for walks on hills to absorb all the beauty around them and all this stuff, and they think they're being really self-aware. But they're not, and maybe they are, maybe they know their own strengths really, really well, and they know what they like and know how to manage their own body, their mind, and all the complexities of life, but they're not necessarily consciously other aware. So that's why I think it needs a different, so you need to be self-aware, other aware, again, open to learning and learning action, because we need to get on with each other and understand each other's strengths and be open to say, okay, I will actually, the way I'm doing this is only one way of doing this. This other person may have a better way of doing it or a different way of doing it. So that's really, really important to, this is again why if you're using particular profiling tools, which are job specific, so you're looking at your job, you're looking at your traits, you're looking at other people in your team, you can start understanding each other far more and saying, oh wow, actually somebody else could be doing this task. Or I love doing this, could I do a bit more of it? So that's another way of putting it. Self-awareness, other awareness, that's where the human connection, it's not a sequential thing, it's more an overlapping mess, But it's just a different way of putting it, that there is that human connection thing between, when you have the self and other awareness. I know me and I know my strengths, I know who I am as much as I can. Of course, you need to do that, but I also need to know you and know your strengths and know who you are. And then we need to connect and be open to learning together, ideally, and then act on things together. So in a way, there is a bit of a sequence, because, if we can deliberately connect and then deliberately learn in action, and we're learning. Learning's a messy business. We're going to get it wrong. We've got to be able to get it wrong. We've got to be allowed to get it wrong. So yes, this is in a nutshell, if I had to summarize some of the key factors, to try and make it really simple. But in the last few minutes, why don't we do a little bit of an activity as you've been sitting and I don't know. It's a good thing to just, what we're going to do, and then everybody, whoever's watching the other end, can sort of join in their minds. We're going to do 3 zones. Might as well go for it, Might as well. So we have 3 zones. We have we have it's a challenge, and we have the enjoyment zone. Now, the reason this is so important is because in fear, what do you think happens when you see a brain? It actually does. It actually does. There is a shutdown effect. Yeah. Yeah, there is actually the top part of your brain, which is the cerebral actually does shut down and everything. So it's really, really important to know, to understand fear zones and safety zones. Yeah, I put enjoyment and safety together, but actually sometimes I might enjoy something that isn't safe. Some people like it, but so it's not necessarily so simple, but I'm just going to read out a couple of things. And if you just go into the zone, you can get okay. So giving a presentation to a key customer at a critical time for your business. So you're giving, that's your job.
You mean presentation?
Yeah. You get, and it's critical time, and it's a key customer. Okay. So it says, you're going to think it's a challenge, you will not necessarily enjoy it, but I will do it for the learning or the experience. So is that something, would you get fear, or would you get enjoyment even out of it? Out of the challenge, or how do you challenge it?
Enjoyment after, but I think again that leads into me building rules. I don't know.
Okay, enjoyment after.
Yeah, I will enjoy it
when it's happening, or the leading up to it.
Yeah. So the leading up to it might be here.
Yeah.
Well, I will avoid it if I possibly can category.
Yeah. Same for you.
Yeah, I think so. It's when it's the weakness is built up business and resuscitation is whether it comes across okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you're talking about
Exactly. I'm going to get back to this earlier. It's so much to do with, if you've done it before, when you practice,
Yeah.
it's a topic you feel comfortable with. It's obviously how about giving a presentation to your best mate on a topic that you really, really love? Okay. Yeah, so you're comfortable, you feel safe.
Yeah.
So your brain and your body can safe when you're doing that compared to that. And we'll build up everything. And how you actually come across. Being aware of that is really, really important. How about eating olives? Okay. How about eating something that you really, you've never eaten, and you're going to be with people who don't like? So it's a new food, and so you don't have to eat it. You're also not going to the event. I mean, I like oh, you know, okay, yeah.
But I also, if I have to, I don't
So it's a negative challenge rather than, would you feel fear, or is it just a negative challenge? Okay. It's like, why am I doing this? Really? So you have okay. So how about if you're flying into the
What I do is I'm there for a year.
So you're a parrot or a parrot. So you you're a science.
I find it all the time.
And that's kind of weird.
I always go on really long flights. Right.
Oh, wow. Living so far away, I was having to, I know it happened. Oh, okay.
So what happens to you when you are anticipating that? So if you're working in a theatre, or if things are, if your tasks are keeping you available, if you're bringing someone else's decisions in theatre, basically, the hormones that are released, the chemistry, the brain chemistry, as well as the electricity is so powerful, and it can affect everything. It can really create a shutdown. So you probably, I know it's a different context, but take that example and then think how you have so it's about creating strategies around this as well. But knowing yourself is really receiving a fabulous generous gift from people saying how wonderful you are and others. Yes, it's great when you feel sick. Some people actually say, oh, manage to say they're not sorry. Some people are embarrassed or whatever, they rather not have the attention or whatever. But on the whole, it's really sick. People do respond to it. So, I'm happy to apologise because you know, it's a very important date. So, yeah, so all of the next day. So now we need to do it, and then it's urged you like in the shower, that morning, is to orientate yourself with that. And those sorts of situations, anything it's churches, you like they have these could be so maybe we're in the studio and workshop space. So rather than actually we don't know art studios, green. There are many children who've got to work with neighbours, maybe your friends, when you do those. If we know that about some YouTube, orange community impact inside which is it's free. First, but then we're going to run straight to or is it about you know all community all those I'm not saying and then finally I think it's a club where the values is we really go to club it's everyone go their own love so what we define culture as to include science and not include that so we'll send this out again that's the highlight yes and then while we're doing it it's insane the next day and so again how about response yeah, because how actually what to choose what it is choose something you want some people work that you say and we can define all the maps that are you have something that then actions and then work okay. But then you'll have others because again, maybe you're an amazing supporter. Maybe actually all structures around.
And then let's finish up. You really enjoy that. And I really enjoy it. Easy. Easy comes to love you. I recommend. Yeah, because you're very simple. You're very simple. Yeah, I think. It's not the best video because stress we have, and therefore the life naturally. This is about resilience. And bouncing back and not worrying about because we have for me, I have resilience, whereas a personal growth shows it's not. It's not about resilience. Resilience is about being able to go back Oh, shall I? Yeah. I'll tell you what, yes, if I just am going to say, yeah, so for anybody still listening on the other end, this is my email address, lizzy@investorsandlearning.com. Please do email me if you want any information on the psychology of work, business psychology. We support people with recruitment and development. We have programs for individual, team, and organisational learning and performance. And our website, investorsandlearning.com, will give you more information. But please do email me, and I will send you more information about this particular topic that we had today. And hope you managed to hear things okay. I'd be very, very happy to talk to you about your work, your business, whether you've got recruitment needs, how we can help you with profiling, and more about what we do. So please be in touch, lizzy@investorsandlearning.com, and thank you very much for listening. Bye.